Okay.
Okay, all right. Okay. The reason that people paid attention to them is because they were loud, okay? They used the media to their advantage. Guys, today, okay, you took a test today, all right? And one of the questions on there was about Richard Nixon's silent majority, okay? That is kin to this. Nixon said when you turn on the television and you see people rioting in the streets, when you see people protesting, okay, you're seeing a minority of people that know how to use the media. They know how to get their pictures in the paper. They know how to get on television. But they're a minority. The majority of Americans don't do that. The majority of Americans wake up every morning, they go to school, they go to work, and they don't do this. That's exactly who these people were. They were very good at using media. They printed their own newspapers, like William Lloyd Garrison and The Liberator, okay? So, and of course, the greatest use of media by then was Uncle Tom's Cabin, okay? So they are going to be a minority. That's important, all right? You need to know this guy. Okay. William Lloyd Garrison is going to be the leader of the American Anti-Slavery Society. He is the publisher of The Liberator. Guys, there were several abolitionist leaders. He's the one that if you're writing an essay, you probably need to know. There was a bounty on him in the South. If Southerners would come north looking for him and capture him, there was a bounty of like $25,000, $30,000. Okay, so he's a wanted man. Right. You know who he is. Okay. Frederick Douglass became important because he published a newspaper called the North Star. The reason it's called the North Star is when slaves would escape from the plantation, that's how they navigated north. They would look and find Polaris in the heavens, and they would follow the star to carry them north. Okay? So these are abolitionist leaders. Why does Douglass have more credibility than Garrison? He was a slave. He was a slave, okay? And that always gives you credibility. Okay? Sojourner Truth. She was a female slave that escaped to New York. And she was an abolitionist, but she was also an advocate for women's rights. Okay, she had tons of credibility because as bad as it is being a male slave, it's worse being a female slave. Something that's distasteful, okay, but it's necessary to talk about. That one of the things that the abolitionists would put in their papers to show people in the North how rotten slavery was the systematic rape of female slaves in the South. If you're a slave owner and the law says you own this human being, then the implication is you can do whatever you want to that human being. There were very few laws that governed slave owner behavior, okay? There are several books out by former slaves that wrote about this, about their experiences. In some places in the South, the mulatto or mixed race population was almost as big as the white population, okay? Especially New Orleans. Place like that, Charleston, South Carolina. And the reason is some of these men on these plantations were having concubines with their slaves. The most famous of all was Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson had an affair with Sally Hemings, who was a slave. So that right there was one of the downsides of it, because if you're a woman, there's an extra dimension to the evil that is slavery. Okay, and that's one thing she talked about. The child that she had 7 children, and 3 of them were white. Okay, so this was something systematic. Okay. This thing. I have to be careful about this because I gave a presentation at Rice on this a few years back. This is something that in the coming years you're going to hear a lot more about because historians are just now uncovering the records on it. Most of the records for the American Colonization Society, oddly enough, are in the British Public Records Office, because that's the country that the Lincoln administration signed an agreement with to colonize Latin America and places like that. Okay, so you'll hear a lot about this. What this is pretty much this is an attempt to free the slaves before the Civil War. Okay, the issue, guys, is not freeing the slaves. The issue is to, number one, if you go to a Southern slave owner who may have paid $2,000 for a male slave, and you say you're going to free that slave, guys, he bought the slave as an economic issue. You take his slave away from him, he's going to want his money back. Slaves are an investment. So the first thing is, if you want to emancipate the slaves, how are you going to compensate the slave owners? Okay. The second thing is this: once you free them, what do you do with them? This is white America. There's no place in white America in the 19th century, especially the early 19th century, for a black society. It's simply not there. So you have these two problems. The American Colonization Society was going to solve them all, okay? The first thing they proposed was a national tax to raise money to buy slaves. You're going to tell the American people they have to pay a tax on their property income to raise money to buy slaves from Southerners, okay? Is this going to work? No, it's not going to work, okay? They will hold on to it for a long time. Lincoln will be a proponent of this, okay? The second thing is we're going to sit here and send them somewhere else. Guys, one thing about Anglo-Saxon America, white America, is white Americans have always had a hard time dealing with other cultures, especially ethnic and racial cultures. And the reason is nobody takes the time to understand them. Guys, you saw that in the 20th century with Asia, with the Japanese in World War II, things like this. The same is true with African slaves. Nobody asked these people, look, if we free you and colonize you somewhere, where do you want to go? Whites just assumed they wanted to go back to Africa, okay? Which was not the case because most slaves didn't want to go back to Africa. What the Colonization Society did was purchase land in Africa, which was called Liberia. They'll purchase these slaves and send them there, okay? This took place pretty much in the 1820s, 1830s. It started to die out after Henry Clay died. Abraham Lincoln will bring it back, okay? So just remember what this is. If you're going to free the slaves, okay, the big question is, how do you do it? All right? And when you're considering this, look at the issues in the way. First of all, slaves are an economic investment, okay? If the government goes in and frees the slaves, Southerners are going to claim it's grand larceny, okay? Second thing is, because it is a racial, cultural issue, what do you do with these people when you free them from their bondage? Very few whites in the United States would agree to let them stay in America. Okay? Is everybody good? So keep that in mind. All right? Okay.